Everyone in the city believed Evelyn Carter had everything money could buy. She owned skyscrapers that touched the clouds, private jets that crossed continents before sunrise, luxury resorts on tropical islands, and a fortune so enormous that newspapers called her one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America. Yet every night she went home to a mansion that echoed with silence. The more successful she became, the more she questioned a painful truth. Did anyone truly love her? Or were they only in love with her billions? Every relationship had ended the same way. The moment men discovered her wealth, everything changed. Their confidence became rehearsed, their affection became calculated, and every promise of forever seemed tied to the balance in her bank account. Evelyn realized she had never experienced love without suspicion. So she made a decision that shocked even her closest advisors. She disappeared. The elegant designer dresses were replaced with simple jeans and modest blouses. Her luxury jewelry was locked away. Her chauffeur was dismissed. She rented a tiny apartment, took an ordinary job, and introduced herself as just another struggling woman trying to rebuild her life. No one would know her real name. No one would know about the billions. This wasn't a game, it was the greatest test of her life. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Many people ignored her. Some laughed at her. Others looked down on her because of the old car she drove and the simple clothes she wore. A few men showed interest at first, but the moment they realized she wasn't wealthy, they quickly disappeared, proving her fears had been right all along. Then one rainy afternoon, everything changed. She met a man named Daniel. He wasn't impressed by appearances because he had learned long ago that character mattered more than wealth. He worked hard, cared for his widowed mother, volunteered at a local shelter on weekends, and treated everyone, from janitors to executives, with the same kindness and respect. When he met Evelyn, he saw not a poor woman, but a kind-hearted woman with honesty in her eyes. As their friendship slowly blossomed into love, Daniel stood by her through every challenge. He encouraged her when she felt discouraged, shared what little he had without expecting anything in return, and believed in her dreams even when the world seemed against her. He never asked about expensive gifts, luxury vacations, or bank accounts. All he wanted was the woman he believed she was. But Evelyn carried a secret powerful enough to destroy everything they had built. Would Daniel forgive her for hiding the truth? Would he walk away after discovering that the struggling woman he loved was actually a billionaire who had tested him from the very beginning? Or would he become the only man who proved that true love cannot be measured by money, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and the heart that chooses to stay when no fortune is in sight? What happened next would leave an entire city speechless, and prove once and for all that genuine love is the rarest treasure a billionaire could ever find. The entire city believed Evelyn Carter had everything money could buy. At just 32 years old, she was one of Africa's youngest self-made billionaires. Her real estate empire stretched across continents. She owned luxury hotels, office towers, shopping malls, and private estates worth billions of dollars. Her face graced the covers of business magazines, and every interview celebrated her as the woman who had turned impossible dreams into reality. Yet every night, she returned to a mansion filled with silence. The more successful she became, the more one painful question haunted her. Did anyone truly love her? Or did they only love her billions? She had dated influential businessmen, politicians, celebrities, and heirs to wealthy families. Every relationship followed the same pattern. At first, the affection felt sincere, but once they learned the true size of her fortune, everything changed. Conversations shifted toward investments, luxury vacations, expensive gifts, and inheritance. Love slowly became a business transaction. Still, she believed she had finally found the exception. His name was Richard Lawson. Charming, intelligent, and confident, Richard had swept her off her feet. He constantly reminded her that money meant nothing to him and that all he wanted was the woman behind the success. For nearly 2 years, Evelyn believed every word. Their lavish wedding at one of Lagos' most luxurious waterfront resorts was expected to become the society event of the decade. Politicians, royalty, celebrities, diplomats, and international business leaders filled the grand ballroom, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Outside, cameras flashed endlessly. Inside, Evelyn stood alone in the bridal suite, taking one last look at herself in the mirror before walking down the aisle. Then fate intervened. She realized she had forgotten her grandmother's diamond bracelet in a private lounge connected to Richard's preparation room. Hopping to surprise him with a quick visit before the ceremony, she quietly walked toward the hallway. As she approached the partially opened door, voices stopped her. Richard was laughing. So in a few hours, one of his friends said, "You'll officially own half of Africa's richest woman's empire." Richard chuckled. "Love," he scoffed. "Please, I don't love Evelyn, I never did." The room erupted in laughter. "I've spent 2 years pretending to be the perfect gentleman. Once we're married, controlling her fortune is only a matter of time. Within a few years, everything she owns will practically belong to me." Every word struck Evelyn like a knife through her heart. She stood frozen outside the door, unable to breathe. The wedding music had already begun downstairs. Hundreds of guests waited. But the happiest day of her life had become the most devastating. Without making a sound, tears streaming down her face, Evelyn removed her engagement ring. She placed it gently on a nearby table. Then she walked away. She left behind the wedding dress. She left behind the guests. She left behind the billionaire everyone admired. And before the sun rose the next morning, Evelyn Carter had vanished without a trace. 3 days after disappearing from her own wedding, the media declared Evelyn Carter the most wanted missing billionaire in Africa. Television stations interrupted their regular programming with breaking news. Newspapers printed her photograph across their front pages. Social media exploded with theories. Some claimed she had been kidnapped. Others believed she had fled the country. A few even suggested she had been murdered by business rivals. Unknown to the world, Evelyn was very much alive. She sat quietly in the back seat of an old commercial bus, heading toward Ikorodu, Lagos, watching the city disappear behind her through the dusty window. She carried only one small travel bag. Inside were a few simple clothes, a pair of flat sandals, some toiletries, and a modest amount of cash she had withdrawn from a private account that could not easily be traced. Everything else, the mansions, luxury cars, private jet, priceless jewelry, and billions of dollars, had been left behind. For the first time in years, nobody recognized her. When the bus stopped at Ikorodu garage, Evelyn stepped onto the busy roadside. The humid afternoon air wrapped around her as traders shouted over one another, motorcycles weaved through traffic, and commuters hurried in every direction. It was a world completely different from the quiet boardrooms and five-star hotels she had always known. She rented a tiny one-room apartment behind an aging building. The room had a narrow bed, a small table, a single plastic chair, and an old ceiling fan that squeaked every few minutes. Rainwater leaked through one corner of the roof whenever it poured. Yet that night, despite everything she had lost, Evelyn slept more peacefully than she had in months. The next morning, reality arrived. Her savings could keep her alive for a while, but she refused to depend on hidden wealth. If she truly wanted to know whether genuine love still existed, she had to live like everyone else. She needed honest work. After asking around the neighborhood, she met an elderly widow known simply as Mama Bose, who sold fresh fruits in the local market. "You've never done this kind of work before," Mama Bose observed, studying Evelyn's soft hands. Evelyn smiled gently. "No," she admitted, "but I'm willing to learn." Something in the young woman's humility touched the old trader's heart. Instead of turning her away, Mama Bose patiently taught her how to identify fresh oranges, ripe bananas, sweet pineapples, and good watermelons. She explained how to bargain respectfully with suppliers, arrange fruits to attract customers, and calculate profits without making mistakes. Within a week, Evelyn had purchased a small wooden wheelbarrow and started selling fruits along one of Ikorodu's busiest roads. Her income was small. Some days she sold everything. Other days she barely earned enough to pay for dinner. Still, every evening she returned home exhausted but proud. One particularly hot afternoon, business was painfully slow. As Evelyn wiped sweat from her forehead, she noticed a young man across the road balancing dozens of sachets of pure water inside a blue cooler. He moved from bus to bus, calling out with determination. Cold pure water, ice cold pure water. Passengers ignored him. Some waved him away. Others took the water without paying until he chased after them. Despite the rejection, he never complained. Instead, he smiled, thanked those who bought from him, and continued working under the scorching Lagos sun. Evelyn watched quietly. She had spent years surrounded by wealthy men who measured people by status and money. Yet there was something different about this young man. She didn't know his name. She had no idea that fate had just placed the one person capable of changing her life directly in her path. The following morning began before sunrise. Long before the streets of Ikorodu became crowded, Evelyn was already arranging neat rows of oranges, bananas, pineapples, apples, and watermelons on her wooden wheelbarrow. Mama Bose had taught her that customers often bought with their eyes first. A clean display invited trust. As the first buses rolled past, she whispered a silent prayer. Lord, let today be enough. Across the road, the same young man she had noticed the previous afternoon was loading sachets of pure water into a blue cooler. He moved with practiced speed, tying the cooler securely to an old pushcart whose wheels squeaked loudly every few steps. Before leaving, he entered a nearby pharmacy. Curious, Evelyn watched from a distance. A few minutes later, he emerged carrying a small paper bag of medicine. Instead of keeping it for himself, he hurried into a modest bungalow tucked behind the pharmacy. An elderly woman opened the door. Even from where Evelyn stood, Evelyn could see the woman struggling to remain upright. The young man smiled warmly, handed her the medicine, and gently supported her back inside before returning to work. There was no audience, no cameras. No one applauded his kindness. He simply did what needed to be done. For reasons she couldn't explain, Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about him. The morning grew busier. Customers bargained aggressively, some paid fairly, others argued over every naira. Evelyn was still learning how to negotiate without losing money, and by noon she had already made several costly mistakes. Then trouble arrived. A teenage boy pretending to examine a bunch of bananas suddenly grabbed 2 apples and a handful of oranges before sprinting into the crowd. "My fruits!" Evelyn cried instinctively. Without thinking, she ran after him. The wheelbarrow remained unattended. As she chased the thief through the busy roadside, she failed to notice an oncoming motorcycle weaving recklessly between vehicles. Its horn blared. People shouted, "Be careful!" Everything happened in seconds. Before Evelyn could react, someone grabbed her arm with surprising strength and pulled her backward onto the sidewalk. The speeding motorcycle shot past, missing her by inches. Her heart pounded violently. She looked up. Standing beside her was the pure water hawker. "Are you all right?" he asked, breathing heavily. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't answer. She simply stared. His clothes were faded from years of use. Sweat soaked through his shirt after hours beneath the hot Lagos sun. Yet his eyes carried a sincerity she had never seen among the wealthy executives who had once surrounded her. I'm fine," she finally managed. "You don't chase thieves on a busy road," he said gently, releasing her arm. "Fruits can be replaced, life cannot." Embarrassed, Evelyn lowered her eyes. Thank you. He smiled. You're welcome. They walked back together toward her wheelbarrow. To Evelyn's surprise, several nearby traders had protected her fruits while she was gone. The young man bent down and picked up an orange that had rolled into the gutter. After washing it with clean water from one of his sachets, he placed it neatly back on the display. My name is Daniel, he said. Evelyn, she replied softly. It's nice to meet you, Evelyn. You too. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The noisy traffic faded into the background. Neither realized that this simple roadside introduction would become the beginning of a journey neither of them could have imagined. From that day forward, Daniel made it a habit to greet Evelyn every morning before beginning his rounds. And without realizing it, Evelyn found herself looking forward to those greetings more than anything else. The weeks passed quietly, settling into a rhythm neither Evelyn nor Daniel had expected. Every morning before the sun rose over Ikorodu, they greeted each other with warm smiles before pushing their carts to different parts of the busy roadside. At midday, when business slowed, they often met beneath the shade of an old almond tree near the bus stop, sharing bottles of water and whatever food they had managed to bring from home. There were no expensive restaurants, no luxury cars, no extravagant gifts. Just two hardworking people finding comfort in each other's company. One afternoon, Evelyn noticed Daniel counting a handful of crumpled naira notes with a worried expression. Everything all right? She asked gently. Daniel forced a smile. It will be. She knew immediately that it wouldn't. Before she could ask another question, his phone rang. The moment he answered, the color drained from his face. What happened? He asked anxiously. He listened for a few seconds before grabbing his cooler. I'm coming now. Without another word, he began running. Concerned, Evelyn locked her wheelbarrow beside Mama Bose's stall and followed from a distance. Daniel raced through narrow streets until he reached the same modest bungalow Evelyn had noticed days earlier. Inside, his mother lay coughing violently on a worn-out mattress. Beside her stood a frightened teenage girl, no older than 15. Brother, she cried, Mama collapsed again. Daniel immediately knelt beside his mother. It's all right, Mama, he whispered, gently holding her hand. I'm here. The elderly woman struggled to smile despite her weakness. I'm sorry, she murmured. I know treatment is expensive. Please don't talk like that. Daniel turned to his younger sister. Did she take her medicine? She lowered her head. We finished the last tablets yesterday. For a brief second, Daniel closed his eyes. Evelyn could almost hear the silent battle taking place inside him. He reached into his pocket and emptied everything he had earned that day onto the small wooden table. The money wasn't enough. Not even close. Still, he picked it up and handed every naira to his sister. Go to the pharmacy, he said. But what about transport tomorrow? I'll walk. And food. We'll figure that out later. His sister's eyes filled with tears. You've not eaten since yesterday. Daniel smiled gently. Mama needs the medicine more than I need lunch. Unable to remain hidden any longer, Evelyn quietly stepped inside. Daniel looked surprised. Evelyn, I followed you because I was worried. An awkward silence filled the room. Daniel seemed embarrassed for her to witness the reality of his life. This is my mother, he said softly. And this stubborn girl is my younger sister, Esther. Esther quickly wiped away her tears and smiled politely. It's nice to meet you. You too, Evelyn replied warmly. Daniel's mother reached for Evelyn's hand. My son speaks highly of you, she said weakly. He says you're hardworking and kind. Evelyn's heart tightened. She wasn't sure she deserved such praise. After all, Daniel still believed she was simply a struggling fruit seller. He had no idea she possessed enough wealth to pay for his mother's treatment 1,000 times over. Yet she couldn't reveal the truth. Not now. Not after everything that had happened before. As she prepared to leave, she quietly placed the little money she had earned that day beneath a folded cloth on the table where no one would notice immediately. She knew it wasn't much, but it was given from the heart. Outside, Daniel caught up with her. "You didn't have to come. I'm glad I did." He looked down at the dusty road. "Sometimes I wonder if working this hard is enough." Evelyn smiled gently. The people who never give up are usually the ones who change the ending of their story. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. For the first time in years, someone had seen his struggles without pity and believed in him without expecting anything in return. Neither of them realized it then. But something beautiful had begun to grow between them, something far more valuable than wealth. A month slipped by, and without either of them noticing exactly when it happened, Evelyn and Daniel had become inseparable. Every morning, Daniel stopped by Evelyn's wheelbarrow before beginning his rounds. "Good morning," he would say with the same genuine smile. "Good morning," Evelyn would reply, feeling her heart grow lighter each time she saw him. If Daniel sold out of pure water early, he helped Evelyn push her wheelbarrow back to Mama Bose's stall. If Evelyn finished first, she waited patiently for him under the old almond tree. Their friendship was built on countless little acts of kindness, none of them expensive, all of them priceless. One Saturday evening, after the market closed, Daniel surprised Evelyn with 2 roasted corn cobs and fresh coconuts. "I know it's not much," he said shyly, "but I thought we could have dinner together." Evelyn smiled. "It looks perfect." They walked to the quiet bank of the Lagos Lagoon, where the cool evening breeze softened the heat of the day. They sat on an old wooden bench, overlooking the calm water as fishing boats drifted slowly toward shore. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence felt peaceful rather than awkward. Finally, Daniel broke it. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything." "What was your life like before you came to Ikorodu?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She looked across the water before answering. "I had a different life." Daniel nodded. "I guessed as much." "You did." "The first day I met you, I noticed your hands." "My hands." He smiled. They didn't belong to someone who had spent years selling fruits. Evelyn laughed softly. "I suppose you're right. But I never asked questions because everyone has a past they're trying to heal from." His words settled deeply into her heart. He wasn't curious about money. He wasn't trying to uncover secrets. He simply respected her boundaries. For the first time since leaving her old life, Evelyn felt completely safe. Meanwhile, miles away in Victoria Island, the Carter Group headquarters was in chaos. The company's board of directors had spent weeks searching for their missing CEO. Private investigators had been hired. Security agencies had been contacted. Richard Lawson had publicly pretended to be heartbroken, granting emotional interviews, while secretly hoping Evelyn would never return. But one investigator refused to believe she had disappeared forever. Former police commissioner Adwail Balagun studied every clue repeatedly. "There has to be a pattern," he muttered. After reviewing hundreds of surveillance recordings, one detail caught his attention. A blurry camera outside a commercial bus terminal had captured a woman resembling Evelyn boarding a bus bound for Ikorodu. "It can't be a coincidence," he said. Within hours, a search team quietly arrived in Ikorodu. Back at the market, Evelyn knew nothing about the investigation. She was laughing as Daniel tried unsuccessfully to teach her how to balance a cooler of sachet water on her head. "You'll never survive 1 hour selling pure water," he joked. "Oh, really?" She carefully lifted the cooler. 3 steps later, she lost her balance. Daniel quickly caught both the cooler and Evelyn before either hit the ground. For a brief moment, they stood face to face. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The noise of the busy market faded around them. Daniel looked into her eyes. "Evelyn." She looked back at him, her heartbeat quickening. "Yes. I don't know when it happened." He took a slow breath. "But you've become the best part of my day." Before Evelyn could respond, a black SUV rolled slowly past the market. Inside, Investigator Balagun examined every face along the roadside. His eyes suddenly stopped. He frowned. "No," he whispered. "It couldn't be." The black SUV continued rolling slowly through the crowded streets of Ikorodu. Inside, former Commissioner Adwail Balagun leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixed on the fruit stalls lining the roadside. "Stop the car," he ordered. The driver immediately pulled over. Balagun stepped onto the busy street, adjusting his cap as he carefully studied every trader. The grainy surveillance image from the bus terminal had been haunting him for weeks, and now, standing barely 50 meters away, he was almost certain he had found the woman the entire country had been searching for. There she was, not dressed in designer clothes, not surrounded by security guards, not stepping out of a Rolls-Royce. Instead, Evelyn Carter, one of Africa's most powerful billionaires, was laughing beside a wooden fruit wheelbarrow, while a young pure water hawker struggled to balance a cooler on his head. Balagun could hardly believe his eyes. "Madam Carter," he whispered to himself. Before he could take another step, his phone rang. It was the chairman of the Carter Group's board. "Any progress?" the chairman asked. Balagun looked back at Evelyn. "Possibly. Bring her home immediately." Balagun remained silent for a moment. Then he surprised even himself. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I need to understand why she left before I drag her back." Without waiting for a response, he ended the call. Something about the smile on Evelyn's face told him she had found a kind of peace that billions had never given her. He quietly returned to the SUV. "Keep watching," he instructed his team. "But don't let her know we are here." Back at the market, neither Evelyn nor Daniel had noticed they were being observed. Daniel's confession still hung in the air. "I don't know when it happened," he repeated softly, "but you've become the best part of my day." Evelyn felt tears gathering in her eyes. No man had ever spoken to her with such honesty. No hidden agenda. No manipulation. No mention of wealth. Just sincerity. She smiled through the emotion. "You've become the best part of mine too." Daniel's face lit up. For a few seconds, neither of them cared about the noisy buses, shouting traders, or endless traffic. The world seemed to disappear around them. Then Daniel's smile slowly faded. "There's something you should know about me." Evelyn looked at him attentively. "I don't have much to offer." "You don't have to." "I mean it." He lowered his eyes. "I sell pure water every day, but after paying rent, buying medicine for Mama, helping Esther stay in school, and replacing damaged sachets, some weeks I barely have enough to feed myself." He took a deep breath. "I can't promise you a big house." He shook his head. "I can't promise expensive vacations. I can't even promise that life will always be easy." He finally looked into her eyes again. "But I promise this. If you ever become part of my life, I'll protect you with everything I have. I'll respect you. I'll never lie to you. And I'll never let money become more important than the woman I love." Those words pierced Evelyn's heart. Richard had promised her luxury. Daniel promised her honesty. Richard had wanted her fortune. Daniel offered everything he possessed, even though it wasn't much. At that moment, Evelyn knew she had found the very thing she had spent years searching for. Yet one painful truth still remained. She had never told Daniel who she really was. That night, alone in her small apartment, Evelyn unlocked the old phone she had hidden away since leaving her billionaire life. Hundreds of missed calls flooded the screen. Then her eyes fell on one unread message. It was from Richard. "You can hide from the world, Evelyn, but you can't hide forever. I'll find you." A chill ran down her spine. For the first time since arriving in Ikorodu, she realized that her past wasn't finished with her. It was coming for her. Evelyn barely slept. Richard's message echoed in her mind over and over. "You can hide from the world, Evelyn, but you can't hide forever. I'll find you." She stared at the cracked ceiling of her tiny apartment until dawn, wondering whether she had made a terrible mistake. For months, Ikorodu had given her something no amount of money ever had: peace. But now, that peace was slipping away. By sunrise, she had made a decision. She would continue living as though nothing had happened. She refused to let fear steal the life she had built. At the market, Daniel immediately noticed something was wrong. "You didn't sleep, did you?" he asked gently. Evelyn forced a smile. "I'm all right." Daniel looked unconvinced, but didn't press her. Instead, he quietly bought a loaf of bread and 2 cups of hot tea from a nearby food vendor. "You skipped breakfast," he said, handing her a cup. She looked at him in surprise. "How did you know?" "You looked tired yesterday. Whenever I'm worried, I forget to eat too." Evelyn smiled sadly. Even in the middle of his own struggles, Daniel never stopped thinking about others. As they shared breakfast, neither noticed a silver SUV parked across the street. Inside sat Richard Lawson. His jaw tightened as he watched Evelyn laugh at something Daniel had said. "So it's true," he muttered bitterly. "She really is here." One of his private investigators leaned forward. "Should we approach her now, sir?" Richard's eyes darkened. "Not yet." He watched Daniel carefully. "A pure water hawker." He laughed coldly. "She left me for him." His pride couldn't bear it. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about revenge. "If I can't have Evelyn," he said quietly, "then neither can he." That afternoon, Daniel finished selling his last sachet of water earlier than usual. "I have something to show you," he told Evelyn. "What is it?" "You'll see." Curious, she followed him through several narrow streets until they reached a small hill overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. An enormous mango tree stood alone at the top. Daniel smiled. "This is where I come whenever life becomes too heavy." The cool breeze rustled the leaves above them. "It's beautiful," Evelyn whispered. "My father brought me here when I was a little boy," Daniel said. "He told me that no matter how difficult life became, I should never let bitterness replace kindness." He reached into his pocket. "I've been saving for months." He pulled out a tiny velvet box. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Inside was a simple silver ring. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't decorated with diamonds. But Daniel had bought it with months of sacrifice. "I know I don't have much," he said nervously. "I know I can't give you the kind of life you deserve." He took a slow breath. "But if you're willing to build a simple life with me." He knelt on one knee. "Evelyn Carter." She froze. Hearing her full name from Daniel's lips startled her. He smiled sheepishly. I asked Mama Bose your full name yesterday. Relief washed over her. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. This proposal contained everything Richard's extravagant wedding never had. Honesty, sacrifice, love. She opened her mouth to answer. But before she could speak, slow applause echoed behind them. Clap, clap, clap. They turned. Standing a few meters away, dressed in an expensive tailored suit and wearing a mocking smile, was Richard Lawson. Behind him stood 4 bodyguards. How touching, Richard said sarcastically. He looked directly at Daniel. Do you have any idea who the woman you're proposing to really is? Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? Richard's smile widened. The woman you think is a poor fruit hawker. He pointed at Evelyn. Is one of the richest women in Africa. Silence fell over the hill. Daniel slowly turned toward Evelyn. His eyes searched hers. He spoke only 4 words. Is he telling the truth? Daniel's question hung in the air. Is he telling the truth? Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. She had spent months dreading this exact moment. Slowly, she nodded. Yes. Daniel stood motionless. The simple silver ring was still in his trembling hand. Richard laughed triumphantly. I told you, he sneered. She's Evelyn Carter, the billionaire who vanished on her wedding day. She owns companies worth billions, private jets, hotels, skyscrapers. She could buy this entire town without blinking. Daniel looked from Richard back to Evelyn. Why? He asked quietly. His voice wasn't angry. It was hurt. Why didn't you tell me? Tears rolled down Evelyn's cheeks. Because I was afraid. Daniel remained silent. She took a shaky breath. The man I was supposed to marry didn't love me. He loved my money. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, I overheard him telling his friends that marrying me was only a way to control my fortune. She looked at Richard. I walked away from everything. Then she turned back to Daniel. I came to Ikorodu because I wanted to know if genuine love still existed. Her voice broke. I disguised myself as an ordinary fruit hawker because I needed someone to love me for who I am, not for what I own. She wiped away another tear. I never meant to deceive you forever. Every day I wanted to tell you the truth, but every day I became more afraid that the moment you knew who I really was, I would lose you. Silence filled the hilltop. Then Richard stepped forward. You've heard enough. He looked at Daniel with contempt. Take the ring back. Men like you don't belong in her world. Daniel slowly looked down at the small silver ring in his hand. Then he smiled. Not at Richard. At Evelyn. He walked toward her. Evelyn. His voice was calm. When I met you, I didn't see a billionaire. He gently took her hands. I saw a hard-working woman selling fruits under the hot Lagos sun. I saw someone who shared her lunch with hungry children. I saw someone who secretly left money for my mother's medicine without expecting thanks. I saw someone who treated every person with respect. He slipped the simple silver ring onto her finger. And that's the woman I fell in love with. Evelyn burst into tears. So your answer, she whispered. Daniel smiled. My proposal hasn't changed. If anything. He looked into her eyes. Now I admire you even more. Richard's face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous. No, Evelyn replied firmly. This is what real love looks like. She took Daniel's hand. For the first time in my life, Someone chose me before my money. Just then, several black SUVs climbed the hill. Former Commissioner Adwail Balagun stepped out, followed by members of Evelyn's executive team. They approached respectfully. "Welcome home, Madam Carter," Balagun said. Evelyn smiled peacefully. "I am home." She looked at Daniel. "Home isn't a mansion. It isn't billions. It isn't power." She squeezed his hand. "It's wherever the right person is waiting for you." 6 months later, the wedding Evelyn had once feared became the one she had always dreamed of. There were no hidden motives. No greedy schemes. No lies. Mama Bose proudly walked Evelyn down the aisle. Daniel's mother, now fully recovered after receiving proper medical treatment, embraced the bride with tears of joy. Esther graduated as the top student in her class, thanks to a scholarship Evelyn quietly established without seeking recognition. As for Richard, investigations into his fraudulent business dealings, uncovered during the fallout from the cancelled wedding, led to criminal charges and the collapse of his reputation. The fortune he had tried to seize was never his, and his greed ultimately cost him everything. Standing before family, friends, and the community that had become their true home, Daniel looked into Evelyn's eyes and repeated the words that had first won her heart. "I don't promise a perfect life. I promise an honest one." Evelyn smiled through happy tears. After searching through boardrooms, mansions, and circles of unimaginable wealth, she had finally found the rarest treasure on earth. Not billions, but a heart that loved her exactly as she was.